Hello and welcome to the DM's Book Club, a podcast where we read about some Dungeons and Dragons and discuss how we might include it in our role-playing campaigns. So, we've done Artificers, we've done Barbarians, we've done Paladins. What next? I didn't know, so I asked my friend David to come back to talk to me about classes. Hello, David. How are you, my friend?
Hi, Fiona. I'm doing good, thanks. It seems that you call me whenever you want to talk about a class and need to fill time. I love it.
David!
Want to talk about something? Is it a D&D class? Great.
Exactly that. So, what have you been up to since we last spoke to you? Because obviously it's been a little while since you've been on the podcast.
It's been a big, crazy lockdown for me, just as much as it has been for the rest of the world. I actually just started a new sort of D&D campaign, which is going to be going up on the YouTube and whatnot pretty soon. And I am very excited about that. I'll give you a bit more information about that at the end. I'm all keen for just talking about what we're going to discuss today, because it's something which is very close to my heart.
David, what is our topic of choice for today?
So we've discussed Paladins, which I've said are hands down my favorite class. We're going to discuss what is now my second favorite class, but it's a very close second, Warlocks.
So for those uninitiated, I appreciate most people who are listening to this will have an idea of what D&D classes are there. But in case you haven't listened to any of these podcasts or even touched Dungeons and Dragons, what are Warlocks, David?
I find the best way to kind of discuss a warlock and what a warlock is at its core is to talk about other classes, which makes no sense.
Excellent. Definition by exclusion. That's perfectly valid in my books. So go on then.
So you've got wizards that are people who've studied for years and years and years to learn spells, and then they're heading off into the world. It's all like big brain, big money, big magic explosion. They're the people that work really, really, really hard. The kind of self-made men of the magic world. Then you've got sorcerers, who I've always regarded as the trust fund rich kids, in that, they're just kind of, kind of born with it. It's like, oh, you were born with dragon ancestry, or there's a bit of a god inside you. Well done on that. It was the genetic arcane lottery and you won it. Warlocks. When I imagine a warlock, and I know someone is going to be very, very angry at this, but when I just picture you basic warlock, I almost just imagine like John Normal Man, like just a big bog standard commoner guy who has absolutely no magical ability whatsoever and has essentially just prayed to Asmodeus or whoever and been like, hey, I'd really like some magic, please. And some sort of force, be it Cthulhu, be it Zariel, be it whatever, has gone, okay, I'll give you magic under these conditions.
I love the fact you said Asmodeus. I think you meant Asmodeus, but I love the fact because obviously there's Asmodee, which is the board game company. So I now have that in my head. It's like you are your patron is a board game company.
This is the downside, Fiona, of only reading these things. In that I'm pretty sure I would walk into any sort of D&D convention and say half the words, and people would string me up.
No, but this is the thing, right? And we'll come to Warlocks in a second, right? I do have the same thing about pronunciations. Like, is
this our first diversion?
This is our first diversion. I completely agree with you. Like, I have seen on D&D Beyond, which we both use and stuff, most of the monsters in it, in the Monster Manual Guide or any of the stat books, they do have somebody speaking them. Usually it's Matt Mercer or Marisha Ray that says the words out loud. But when it's gods or when it's devils, anything that's named, there is not an option to speak it out loud. So you have to go to Google and there'll be like some random YouTube video from a North American man who says it's like this. And I'm like, oh, it's a North American accent. Not entirely sure. So do not worry. Pronunciations, especially when it's like Norse stuff, I'm terrible at, as you know. And just anything, I'm just like, oh, I'll give it a go. Anyway, Warlocks. I love that distinction you make as well. Like the wizards are the ones that really work hard and will get a pass eventually because they work hard. And sorcerers were just naturally fucking gifted in one way or another.
I like to imagine that there's like a gang rivalry between wizards and sorcerers, not like an actual gang rivalry, but like a West Side Story gang rivalry, in that they hate each other.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Or well, not hate, maybe envious or jealous of. Like with the new Strixhaven stuff coming out. So again, I don't know if you know, David. There's this new Strixhaven, which is like a setting, which is basically Hogwarts or a magical university and stuff. And it's basically a way to give yourself subclasses if you're a wizard, sorcerer, bard, druid, and warlock, essentially.
That's cool.
Yeah, it's really cool. Again, we have another episode that's come out about that, so you can listen to that when that's properly out.
Will absolutely follow that one.
But it's exactly the same. Whereas warlocks, as you said, their powers are not they're not natural, they're gifted to them. And I got down from the DM's guide that it talks about that they are seekers of knowledge, but this knowledge is sort of hidden in the fabric of the multiverse. So when you are given your sort of magic to go, you are trying to seek out the truth in quotation marks, and you are getting these pacts, these sort of relationships you make with mysterious beings of supernatural power, wherever it is like deities or like you say, great old ones, or it's something maybe sometimes you do know of this creature, or sometimes it is something so big and vast that you are insignificant, and whether or not you have that relationship to it. So it talks about when you make a pact and stuff, and I think it's very important. It says this in the DM's guide, and also says it in Xanathar's as well, I believe, and Sword Coast, that the idea is that when you're creating a warlock character, the big sort of pushing point on the cornerstone is the patron itself, which I know we'll go into all the different ones, but what is this patron's attitude to you? Again, what is this relationship like? Is it just one way? Is it both ways? Is it a close thing? Do they really like you? Are they sort of apathetic to your needs? Like, I think when you're developing this sort of character, if you want to go for a warlock, we'll see there's so many different and interesting ways you can portray it. You have to think about that power dynamic. Is it something that your patron relies on you quite heavily, or do you rely on the patron and back and forth and make it like a really interesting sort of backstory for you, but also for your DM as well? Because I can imagine as a DM, you have to put a lot of thought into creating this patron who will visit regularly. And I think it's very different to compare to, say, a paladin god or anything for druids per se. It could be more manipulative.
Which is one thing which I find is absolutely fascinating about just the core concept of the class, and one reason I love it so much. Like when we were discussing paladins, I said that one of the reasons they're my favorite class is that they have this great role-playing extra sort of like bit on them, if you will. Great English, David. And it's almost like, you have a way that you want to act. Like you can sit there and go, okay, it is without a doubt, it is the smarter decision to kill this person. But my tenets, as say an Oath of Devotion paladin, say that I can't kill them because they are unarmed, and despite being pure evil, they are asking for mercy. I have to give mercy. That's great because, that leads to a fantastic bit of character development for the player, in that, then the paladin can begin to question what they're doing. But the warlock, I love the warlock for its role-playing potential because of that relationship with the patron. You can, say, play a good warlock who has an evil patron, and this is something that I want to loop back around to later. And, you can be wanting to do things for a good reason, but the patron can just be like, well, hey, I need these people killed, and I'm giving you your powers, so you're going to go and do it. And because I'm your patron, I'll know. It is like I was saying, that sort of that power dynamic. It refers to it as sort of a master-servant type dynamic. Yeah. And I loved, again, in the DM's guide, it talks about so what led you to make that pact? And usually it is some form of knowledge. How do you make contact with your patron? That's another thing to consider. Is it through you praying to them? Is it through dreams? One thing I did, I think very early on, I can't remember if you in that, maybe that one shot, David, probably not, I can't remember. I did a warlock who would communicate through a mirror, and it would be the own reflection speaking back as the patron. Very cool. Right. I feel like I'm the coolest person in the world because I thought of that, but it happens all the time. That's very cool. Who found who? I think this is an interesting one. It's so funny. I heard recently people talk about it when you rescue animals or dogs or stuff like that. And it's like, who really rescued who? Yeah. And I just like that as the idea of the patron, sort of like that relationship is like, did your patron find you, or did you find the patron? Did you seek that person out? And again, deciding where that comes from can really change that power dynamic and that relationship to discovering your warlock patron.
the other questions it's had was, do you chafe under the obligations of your pact, or do you serve joyfully in anticipation of the rewards promised to you? Again, that sort of attitude you can have is like you said, like the frustrated, like, I do these things for my patron, but I don't agree with them. Or do you go, oh yes, of course I will kill them because I will get rewarded in some way?
Yeah.
And I guess alignment is not the right word here, but it helps with the motivation. Are you one that is pursuing for selfish means, or are you somebody who is sort of trying to find out to help a common good, perhaps? And sort of the final one, which I do want to talk about in terms of creating a warlock, another question which I thought was really interesting is like, do you know other servants of your warlock?
Ooh.
Right? Because more often than not, we do assume that it is a solo thing. Like when you talk to your warlock, it is, or you talk to your patron, sorry, it is a one-off thing, like a one communication. And the same with paladins, I guess, as well. We've discussed about it where it's like a one-on-one session. What if you found another person who serves the same warlock and you had like a group meeting or something like that? So I know in Critical Role, for example, Ford, played by Travis Whittingham, he gets to a point where he meets another person who's serving the warlock, and then they have a big sort of tiff or a fight about it. I can't remember the exact details, it's been such a long time, but again, that idea that when you meet somebody else, is that an awkward interaction? Is that something that you anticipate and enjoy about it? So I just thought that was such a great question, because it's something I'd never considered, because again, for me, warlocks seem to be a very not a lonely character figure, but a sort of a solo, this is my path, I must travel it alone. But if there's others, well, that changes the dynamic slightly, I think.
Well, yeah, because that kind of thing almost, and I realized I made a Star Wars reference the last time we were here as well, so maybe I should stop it. But, you know, it kind of, especially if it's like an evil patron and the warlocks are evil as well, kind of almost reminds me of the Sith, like, you know, the children or the apprentices scheming against each other so they look better in the patron's eyes. And, you know, if the patron is kind of evil as well, they kind of encourage that fighting as, you know, they're looking for that champion, the person that's most deserving of their gifts, and will want their servants to battle for that. I absolutely adore it, as you know, when the mechanics of a class or just kind of how it's written come into how it's played. Like, look, I'm not going to badmouth like fighters or anything like that, but it's very sort of straight-laced when you're a fighter. You can use every single weapon anyone has ever conceived of. Well done, you. And all the armor, and, you know, it's great. It's like, play a fighter, cool. Go off. What are you going to do? Go do it. Go hit it 5 times because, you know, you can do that in 6 seconds because time is nothing to you. You're that well trained. But it doesn't extend beyond that. You're a fighter and that's who you are. That's it. There's no God who has made you swear an oath that you need to stick to, and there's no patron that has its demands or its requests. It's just you go and you fight, as opposed to, you know, you could be going into this very important mission for one member of the party and your character is the warlock, and your patron just appears and goes, so you're trying to do this, I actually need you to sabotage that.
Yeah. Because
then it's, what do you do? Where's your loyalty? Is it to your patron or is it to your allies? Like, brilliant questions that really do round out a character more than just, and forgive me for this one, I rage. Hey, there's nothing wrong with rage. I love barbarians, and we've talked at length about how much I love the Path of the Zealot. So, yes. So we'll have a quick look into the main class features of just the Warlock before going into it. So interestingly enough, I think as we've sort of alluded to, the majority of this episode is going to be talking about the patrons, because there is, like, if I do a quick count, there's 9 of them in total of the different patrons you can have, but there's only 4, I don't know if I call them subclasses or if I just call them sort of like features essentially, but we'll come into that in a second. But the main sort of gist, as you get, of if you were doing a quick build of a warlock, for example, obviously, and you were using this from Player's Handbook, obviously, I know, and I say this pretty much every episode, Tasha's has changed everything. Yeah, that's great. But if you were going to build it from the Player's Handbook, you've got the following. So you put your highest ability score into Charisma, because that is what you're going to be using for your spell slots and spell attacks, followed by Constitution, which I thought is hilarious because you need those hit points, I think, for this, for what we're about to describe. It then says for background, Charlatan.
And I think this is quite interesting because obviously when we just talked about it, Warlocks, we tend to consider them to be evil because they've made a pact with something that's beyond our comprehension as people. And because they are so unknown, compared to, say, I don't know, gods who have been written stories about or something like that, instantly you go, ooh, they could be selfish, they could be evil. So I think that's quite interesting with the charlatan. You have a background for that. So,
yeah, it's already suggesting quite a shady one to begin with.
Exactly, which I think is quite interesting in that respect. Yeah. But again, you could have warlocks that are trying to fight for the balance, which we've talked about before, this idea that the big bad fight between devils, demons, and angels, if it tips too much in one way, one group will win, and that is the end of it. It's bad for everyone else. So maybe you are a warlock that has to keep the balance per se, or anything like that. So whilst it does, the quick build says charlatan, you don't have to see it like that. It could be a pretense per se, and there is something with the charlatan background where you have like an actor or a disguise, I think, off the top of my head. And then finally, you get for your sort of spells, the beginning sort of spells, if you're taking the quick build, Eldritch Blast, which I think is the most famous spell. After Magic Missile.
I'm pretty convinced that Eldritch Blast, especially with the invocations that you can add later on, makes it the single greatest cantrip in the game.
And I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, if you know, David, is that no other spell gets that per se. Like I said, so we'll come on to Eldritch Invocations, which primarily boost up this main skill, this main spell that Warlocks can have access to.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't know of anything other than that. Obviously, I know Paladins obviously had their Smite, and maybe that's increased by a few. I don't know if they'd have invocations, actually, I can't remember. But I think it's very interesting that most of this class, if you don't take Eldritch Blast, then you will miss out a lot, but you might be building something different as well. And then finally, just to round off, you've got also Chill Touch as your sort of second cantrip, and then you've got for your first level spells Charm Person, which is always a good one, I think, at a low level, and Witch Bolt, which is incredible. I love Witch Bolt.
I love Witch Bolt simply because, and I'm going to loop back around to Star Wars, I can't not feel like Emperor Palpatine when I cast it. Like, it's just, you cast it, it hits, and then all you need to do is go, oh, I'm still battering them with lightning.
It is, it's that one that it can literally give over and over again. And if I remember off the top of my head, it's like a 1d12 damage. 1d12 lightning damage. I mean, I love a good D12, as you know. So.
Yeah, all you've got to do is hit once, and then it's just like, I'm going to keep hitting it.
So looking at other class features, we've got, so it's a 1d8 for sort of hit points.
Which is good for a caster.
I think that is very good for a caster, especially, I think, because a lot of people will describe, and I'm sure we've described it as well, the Warlock as a glass cannon, can hit really hard, but if something hits hard back, you're pretty much done for, essentially. So it's that sort of thing where maybe you're considering Warlock to be a little bit further back, perhaps sort of a ranged spell caster, essentially. But 1d8 is not too bad. Proficiencies in light armor, simple weapons, no proficiency in tools, which for me makes sense because you're a fucking academic.
Well, that's the thing. You're not an academic. You're just some guy.
You're just some guy who's managed to get a PhD in darkness. Saving throws in wisdom and charisma, and then you can choose 2 skills from Arcana, Deception, History, Intimidation, Investigation, Nature, and Religion. So a nice widespread, but again, they all of those skills aren't necessarily like they'll help you overcome like physical things. It is more like learning about history, finding out information, and taking stuff from the environment. So it is about learning things rather than overcoming obstacles, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, and with those selection of skills, it's almost as if the game kind of wants you to throw them your next highest in intelligence or something like that. Like, it's encouraging that kind of more definitely, your Warlock should think about things.
I think there is that sort of tendency that, because we've talked about it before, where like Warlocks, obviously they're getting the highest in charisma and then second highest in constitution, and then you're like, well, I'm going to be a bit further back, and if all my spells are going to rely on the charisma or they're not called mental abilities, but you know which one I mean. So the intelligence, wisdom, and charisma, you might not put them into strength and dexterity because presumably you're going to be a bit further back. So absolutely, I completely agree. It does feel like you are shifting your stats, certainly from this sort of quick build look to that. But again, with Tasha's, you can pick 2 of any skill, so you can always change that as well. Moving on to the sort of class features. So obviously at level 1, you get Otherworldly Patron, which we'll go through all 6 of them in a second.
Oh, yes.
So that, again, it's very interesting because that is right at level 1, whereas other specifications for stuff. So for example, paladins, I guess, they're level 3, right? And most things are at level 3, you get your specialization. Certainly barbarians as well have that. So whereas otherworldly patron, you need to decide then and there, which makes sense, I guess, for the storytelling. Pact magic, obviously. So again, that's magic you get from your otherworldly patron. So that's pretty straightforward. But, and I'm going to ask you about this because I really struggle to comprehend this. And I think other people do as well. Spell slots and warlocks. What is all that about, David? Can you explain to the uninitiated, if that's all right?
Well, as you know, and I'm amazed that we've made it this long without me bringing it up, yes. My main character that I play every week with you is a paladin and a hexblade. So I am used to this. Basically, my understanding of it, unlike everything else, and I know wizards now kind of have an ability where they can regenerate a set number of spell slots on short rests, but with the exception of the warlock, everyone gets their spell slots back on a long rest. Warlocks don't, which is weird. And I think that is more kind of like the mechanics bleeding into the role play. They want it to come across like you are not getting your magic from a natural way. Like it's unnatural how you have it. It should feel like that. It needs to feel different because the warlock is different from the druids, from the wizards, from the sorcerers, from the bards who've, studied or learned in one way or another. The warlock is being given that power. And I also think this factors in to spell slots as well in how limited the number of spell slots a warlock has is. You only get one level of spell slot.
Yep.
You only get a set number and they always come back on a short rest. I think, if I'm not mistaken, I can't remember how much it is you get at the end, but I think it's
not very high at all. I was just checking myself. Yeah. So the number of spell slots you get is 4.
Yeah, and it only goes up to 5th level.
5th level.
Which is nothing for a caster.
It is quite scary. And yeah, as you go down, you can see, like, you can learn up to 15 spells. So when this is at level 20 as well. But yeah, if you've only got 4 spell slots at level 5, and correct me if I'm wrong, because again, I don't really know how this works. So if you, say you are at level 20 and you cast a spell, does it always have to be at that max level? If you see what I mean?
Yes, so your spell slots will start at level 1, and then one day they will just go to level 2 and they will stay at level 2, regardless of what you want to do. Even if you want to cast the most basic of shield, it has to use that spell slot.
So that's interesting. So when you have something like Charm Person, for example, when that goes up a spell slot, like you can charm obviously more people depending on how high it is. So, but if you only wanted to charm one person, it still has to be at that level. So you're almost wasting having a spell like that in a way, which is very interesting.
Absolutely. There's one of the spells, Darkness, which I think is a great spell and can be used to really kind of screw over your DM and then subsequently your players. But we'll get onto that. But let's say you get that, and it is a great spell, but that's a 3rd level spell. It doesn't do anything different if you cast it at a higher level, except you burn through a spell slot unnecessarily. And if that's what you want to do, then that's what you've got to embrace. And to me, I think that is the core of the class, just showing that it's different. And the fact that you only get so few and they have to be 1 level, to me, is almost makes the Warlock feel like it's just a repository for its patron's power, and it can't hold that much of it, and it can't hold it for very long because it's not supposed to. It's not done the work for it or anything. I mean, you can argue that sorcerers don't do the work, but it's innate to them. Like, a wizard has earned the right to have that many spell slots for all the work they've done. I really like the way spell slots work for warlocks. It's really,
I think I can imagine it's very helpful and I'm sure you'll correct me on this, I guess out of all the spell casting classes, it is the easiest one to remember because you only have so little. So it's easier, you're not like overwhelmed by choice because you're like, I only have these spells. What could I do? I mean, obviously I know there's the role player and go, oh, well, I definitely would learn this spell because of this. But if you were like min-maxing or anything like that, you'd be like, oh, these spells would be best because they have effects at higher levels. Moving on slightly from that, though, the other thing, there's several ways it gets around the lack of spell slots and the level as well. So obviously those are the main ones, but you have 2 other things, one of which we'll come to a little bit later, but invocations, eldritch invocations, which you were sort of alluding to. Can you
I love them.
Well, describe what they are exactly, if you
Okay, right. Here's my crazy big statement for the podcast, I think Eldritch Invocations are the thing that makes Warlocks the most customizable class in D&D. You could have a Warlock, and I can have a Warlock, and thanks to Invocations and our choice of different patrons, they will be so unrecognizably different from each other. You know, I could have someone that stays really, really far back, and with whatever invocation is just constantly firing off Eldritch Blast after Eldritch Blast. And, you know, is a glass cannon, can't take punishment at all, but devastates with spells at range. Whereas, let's say for whatever reason, your party doesn't have a melee fighter or a tank or whatever, you could play a Hexblade Warlock and put all your invocations towards the Hexblade stuff. So, you know, that's going to give you 2 attacks, which is normally for martial classes. That can boost your weapon up to being a +3 weapon if you want. So we could have the same class, but then be totally different. Like, if I have a bunch of players starting a campaign and 2 of them are talking about doing the same class, same subclass, 9 times out of 10, I would probably say to both, are you sure? Because you're going to be doing a lot of the same stuff. You're going to be overlapping a lot. It might get a bit tedious. I wouldn't feel the need to have that conversation with 2 Warlock players because they can be that different.
Yeah, so in the book, they're described as fragments of forbidden knowledge that imbue you with an abiding magical ability. It's like, oh, I love how Wizards describes them. But yeah, most of the time it sort of boils down to a couple of things. So it usually either adds damage to something. So usually your weapon attack or Eldritch Blast, you know, you get that sort of thing. You also get, or another kind of invocation you get is that you learn a spell which you can cast without its components or using a spell slot, which is also quite good. But I've picked out a couple that really stood out to me that have sort of come up. I think this is from a most recent one from Tasha's, I think. No, I think actually it's from Van Richten's, actually. Cloak of Flies. So as a bonus action, you surround yourself with a magical aura that looks like buzzing flies. Yeah, and extends 5 feet in every direction, but not through total covered. It lasts until you dismiss it as a bonus action. Advantage on charisma/intimidation checks, but disadvantage on all other kind of charisma checks.
I mean, that makes sense.
You're just like, I have flies.
You are becoming probably the epitome of terror. Someone in full armor with a halberd or whatever, walking down a corridor with a cloak of flies around them. You're going to give that guy your lunch money, but you're not going to ask him to tea.
Exactly. So yeah, there's so many here. Like I said, what was the other one I wanted to refer to?
If we're looking and talking at invocations, you've got to mention the one that everyone gets. I'm trying to remember the name that we're talking because... Yeah, it's Agonizing Blast.
Oh, Agonizing Blast. So that's one way. It's just adding more and more. Add your charisma modifier to the damage it deals on the hit.
Yeah, that's it. So you've got however many beams that can fire off in however many directions as you want, which is another thing that's great, as opposed to say Firebolt. It's a firebolt. It will do 4d10, which is great. Whereas Eldritch Blast it's 4 blasts. If one of them misses, the other ones will hit. And exactly. If you've got a Warlock and you've taken Agonizing Blast, instead of just doing a plain 1d10, it immediately shoots your damage, especially if you've got 20 charisma, from 6 to 16.
Yeah.
No, 6 to 15. Maths, David.
But even that, but that's it's significant. Anything getting into double figures, you're hitting on one hit, and if you've got several beams of Eldritch Blast I found Farscribe. So I don't know if you've read this one. So a new page appears in your Book of Shadows. So this is from the Pact of the Tome, which we'll go into in a second. With your permission, a creature can use its action to write its name on that page, which can contain a number of names equal to your proficiency bonus. You can cast the Sending spell, targeting a creature whose name is on the page without using a spell slot, without using material components. To do so, you must write the message on the page. The target hears the message in their mind, and if the target replies, the message appears on the book rather than in your mind, and the writing disappears after 1 minute. As an action, you can magically erase a name on the page by touching it. We've used Sending quite a bit, and having...
Constantly.
constantly. And obviously it uses a lot of spell slots. It's a 3rd level spell. So having basically what I think is Death Note, writing people's names in it, it could always be, you know, if you're like, oh, we need to tell the mayor of the town, just write your name here, sir. Don't worry, we'll get back to you. It's just, that adds a little bit of creepiness to it. I love that idea of having, like, again, making communication so much easier because it's in a book somewhere.
Also, if you think about it, I mean, obviously one of the big drawbacks of Warlocks is the fact that you have so few spell slots. This is just intelligent ways of getting around that.
Absolutely.
Pact of the Tome is great, and if I wasn't playing a Hexblade, I would absolutely have the Tome.
Well, let's talk about these pact boons then. So at
Let's
third level,
do it.
At 3rd level, you have your otherworldly patron bestows a gift upon you for your loyal service. So this is where it's basically the subclasses. So that when you're at 3rd level, it is that subclass thing, but there's only 4 of them. So you have the Pact of the Blade, the Pact of the Chain, the Pact of the Tome, and then you have the Pact of the Talisman. And the Blade, most people will, again, through Critical Role, will realize that it's the one where you can bring a weapon out from nowhere. It is, you are connected to the weapon, and that is your focus for your magical spell casting abilities.
Exactly.
The Pact of the Chain, I think, is a really interestingly named one, because it's actually, I say there's no chains involved. I don't know how people find it. But you can have familiar. So a bit like how you imagine rangers to have their animal companions, you can have a choice. And I think you can change it, like your DM can probably change it as well. You could either have an imp, a pseudo-dragon, a quasit, or a sprite. So again, certainly quasits are evil, or they've been perceived to be evil, and imps and sprites are dubious at best. And as obviously a pseudo-dragon, it's a person with a dragon on your shoulder. You're like,
I just want a pseudo-dragon because it'd be cute.
It would be cute. I agree.
Like, I'm just imagining baby Smorg.
Pretty much. And yeah, again, you can forgo one of your attacks to allow your familiar to make an attack with its reaction. So again, you could, if you're one of those people who wants to use your pet, or it's not your pet, your familiar, sorry, in battle, you can do that. And then you have the Pact of the Tome, which we've kind of alluded to, is that your patron gives you a grimoire called a Book of Shadows, and you get more spell slots from it as well. That basically, it is a bit like a wizard spell book, essentially, from that sort of thing. And I'll just quickly talk about the talisman.
So this is the new one, isn't it?
Yes. So this one, your patron gives you an amulet, a talisman that can aid the wearer when the need is great. When you fail an ability check, you can add a d4 to the roll, potentially turning it into a success. And you can use that number of times equal to your proficiency bonus for doing it on a long rest. So you could essentially bless yourself or guidance yourself for each roll, essentially. So again, it doesn't increase, as far as I'm aware, with the levels, but an extra d4 when you need it. Certainly in the big boss battles, when you're doing saving throws and stuff, it's probably, oh no, it's an ability check, not a saving throw. Interesting. So it's your ability checks to do stuff. So I guess, so you're not attacks or saving throws. Interesting. But yeah, so those are the main sort of the packs, essentially, that you can do. There's sort of 4 subclasses. But again, as we sort of alluded to, it mostly this class focuses on the different patrons, and that's where you get your different flavors.
Yeah, and there's the big thing of combining your patron and your path. Like, for instance, if your patron is the Hexblade, which we'll go into, you're going to choose to be Path of the Blade, because it just makes sense.
Exactly.
You're already going to be there. It's going to do the things that you're doing better. It's great. To me, reading about those 4, what it occurs to me is that essentially it's divided the Warlock into, and the way I see it, just from a surface reading, into the 3 sort of different positions in combat. The Blade is, you're in the face of things. You're shoulder to shoulder with the fighters and the barbarians. That's where you belong. Path of the Tome is, you're at the back with the wizard and sorcerer. You're flinging out the spells. You're doing the damage. You're going all Emperor Palpatine with Witch Bolt. And then you've got the other 2, Chains and Talisman. Now, they strike me as the more kind of variable ones.
Agreed.
Like, you can be where you sort of want to be. You're not sort of limited, whereas the other 2 are very much like, okay, if this is what you're going to pick, this is probably where you should be. Yeah,
your strongest point where you should be. I completely agree with that. So it does define pretty much where your specialities even more. And then just to quickly go on, because I'm aware of time, the final sort of features you get are either the ability modifier improvements, obviously standard for most classes, or again, if you were one of those people, you could take a feat. But here is something I find interesting. So again, we talked about those Eldritch invocations, and obviously that helps out with the lack of spell slots. So you can add damage or add another spell without a spell slot to your repertoire. But then at levels 11, 13, 15, and 17, you get Mystic Arcanum, which is essentially you can choose a spell. They call it a magical secret called Arcanum, which you just take a spell from the Warlock spell list, essentially. You get one at level 6th level, 7th level, 8th level, and of course 9th level. So you have like a one-off ones that you can expend per long rest, which is incredible. So you could have, you can have certainly the high power things, but it's like a one use only per battle. So you could have a lot of fun with that, getting different ones for it.
Absolutely. And that's one thing which I, again, find really interesting, and it is helping to kind of bridge the gap of where the Warlock is falling down. So yeah, having your spell slots that stop at 5th level is not great. But if you think about it, you've got 4 spell slots that are going to come back on a short rest. And then you've got these long rest ones, just like everyone else. So if you've got these spells that really suit your character, the kind of Warlock you're building, great, you're laughing. Like, you've got your high-powered hits. And plus, I think, if I'm remembering correctly, wizards and sorcerers don't really have more than one 9th level spell slot anyway. So because those are your reality bending spells.
Yeah. It talks about it that this is a dark secret that's been bestowed on you by your Warlock of dubious nature. So they are good. It's going to be fucking horrific, whatever it is, like when you get there.
Yeah. And this is something which, if I was DMing a Warlock, something which I would want to sort of work in is the idea of, okay, yeah, you've leveled up and you've got this Mystic Arcanum skill, but I probably want to talk to them about the idea of, don't take that yet. Don't just, let's ignore that for now. But very soon what we're going to do is we're going to bring in the patron wants a favor. They want something done, and the Mystic Arcanum is your reward.
Like probably make a storytelling moment. Yeah.
And I do think the Warlock does lend itself to a lot of these storytelling moments. Like my big controversial statement for Warlocks is I very much hesitate with the idea of starting with a Warlock and starting with a pact. I would kind of like to see, and I get mechanically why this can't happen, but an ideal, just entirely fictional world of it's all about the role play and screw the mechanics. I would love to see the patron not picked until like 2nd level, like, wizards choose their school. Because I feel to kind of start with, oh yeah, I'm totally in bed with the devil, it
sets you up, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's missing a lot of that amazing potential. But like, how do they get to that point? And which is why I went into Warlock with already having 3 levels in Paladin, and that worked great in that there was, this great in-character reason why he would sort of like agree to take on this weapon and this task. And it made a lot more sense, and it made playing the Warlock all the more enjoyable whenever the patron shows up and it's like, hey, how are things? So I need a favor. Because, like in our campaign, just to bore the listeners with that for a little bit.
Talk about us more, David. No, please.
So I think it was level 3 where your character had died.
Yeah.
And my character took on this sort of Hexblade pact as a favor. So he did it for this patron, and the patron was going to bring your character back to life as payment. But now my character's indebted, which then led to, despite the fact how his sword would start messing with him and it would have all sorts of horrible physical side effects. And everyone's like, you need to get rid of this. It's evil. The character deep down is thinking, I can't, because if I go back on my words and the patron just goes fair, deals off, my friend just drops dead. And that's the thing, that's the glory of Warlock for me, that you can have these brilliant character moments. So yeah, I'm not convinced that Warlock should really be taken as your first level straight out of the gate, just because of that. Yeah,
would it be better as you can only do it if you're going to multi-class per se, so like what you did, that you're already starting off as a different class, but then if you were DMing it, you're like, oh, well, you take a level in Warlock, but only, like you said, through a storytelling hook.
Yeah, but of course, then what's the point in having a 20th level Warlock ability?
Which I've literally, well, look at that segue, David. Amazing. So yeah, I was going to say at level 20, this Warlock is interesting. So you draw on the inner reserve of magic, mystical power whilst entreating your patron to regain expended spell slots. You can spend up to 1 minute entreating your patron for aid to regain all of your expended spell slots from your packed magic feature. So those 4 level 5 things, get those back, and you can regain this on a feature. So that, it's a 1 minute compared to a short rest or a long rest. So you could just be like, we're about to go into the next room. We just had a battle. Give me 1 second. And then you don't have to long rest it. You could just zip up your powers again, and
which keeps you going for a little bit longer, as opposed to, say, if you start off the adventuring day, you have one really tough fight, you burn through all your spell slots, and then you're just like, cool, well, I need a short rest. Like, well, we can't have one now. It helps with that. Keep going. Which is great for the Warlock, but just looking at it on paper as a level 20 ability, never loved it.
No,
it feels like level 20 abilities should be the be all and end all of you are the absolute pinnacle of what you can do. Rogues become so difficult to hit and so good at stuff that they're practically not even real anymore. Paladins, I don't know all of them off by heart, but one of them is for the Oath of Vengeance. You are literally an avenging angel. You're on fire with burning wings and you're scary. Warlocks, just take a minute and you have your spell slots back. It just feels so anticlimactic to me.
No, I think that's fair. That's fair. So let's go diving in then to the patron stuff. So in the basic rules, or the player's handbook, you have 3. So you've got the Archfey, the Fiend, and the Old One. So 3 very different different areas, I think. So I love the idea that, although I say that, I just looked down, I put archery instead of Archfey, so that's good. Nice. Hey, go me.
Patron is a sentient bow.
So we've not really delved deep into the Archfey on this podcast before, but we've done a bit about the Feywild. So this idea that these Fey creatures, that they're whimsical and they're inscrutable, but they're very envious and jealous, and they're sort of wildly passionate about things. So that, and you've had it yourself, obviously, in our campaign, you sort of alluded to, where they just turn up and go, "I need you right now, come," and almost like a Meryl Streep from The Devil Wears Prada. That's sort of like, that's all, that sort of acting away from it. And you get a couple of things with that. You get Fey presence, so it's like it's almost like an aura around you, per se, where creatures can be charmed or frightened by you, but they have to succeed on a wisdom saving throw. Misty escape.
That one is you vanish into a puff of mist in response to harm. So you use your reaction to turn invisible and teleport 60 feet away into an occupied space. And you're invisible until the start of your next turn, or until you attack or cast a spell.
Which is pretty good. At 6th level, just the ability to disappear and then move, like teleport,
Oh yeah, great if you're that back of the line caster type of Warlock. Like, really useful for that.
Beguiling defenses, so you're immune to being charmed, and when another creature attempts to charm you, you can use your reaction to turn the charm back on them.
Brilliant. It's the Warlock equivalent of "no, you."
Uno, no.
The ultimate Uno reverse card.
Oh my goodness. And then you finally get something called Dark Delirium. So you can plunge a creature into an illusory realm. As an action, choose a creature you can see within 60 feet. It must make a wisdom saving throw against your Warlock save DC. It is charmed or frightened by you if it fails for 1 minute or until your concentration is broken. Until the illusion ends, the creature thinks it is lost in a misty realm with the appearance of which you choose. The creature can only see and hear only itself, you, and the illusion. So again, a proper I can't think of what film it is now, when it's almost like Matrix style, where it's just you and Morpheus in a misty sort of realm. I guess it'd be interesting, because they then can only attack you or see you, perhaps. So you can, I guess, using that sort of misty escape, if it comes for you, like, nope, and then just move away, but move to maybe when you can see your other party members and zip around the battleground, I guess.
Also, if I'm thinking of this correctly, you could take them to an illusory realm. This realm can be whatever you want. They can be just like 30 feet away from you, and they can see that. But your illusionary realm is the two of you on completely separate pedestals. With massive drops between you.
Yeah, almost like a big cliff edge between you. Like a trench, essentially. That'd be quite cool. Yeah.
Like that's a great one, because you'd have to be either really, really, really smart or downright suicidal to challenge that.
Yeah,
because enough like teleportation, banishment, whatever magic exists in D&D for you to take that as fact as you see it.
And quickly looking at the Archfey expanded spell list, so you got stuff like Fairy Fire, Sleep, Calm Emotions, Plant Growth, Greater Invisibility, Seeming, Dominate Person. So again, all these sort of things which are Feywild related, like it's all about manipulation, but also nature in that sort of way, which is pretty cool.
I love the Fey, but they freak me out. With devils and demons, you know where you stand. I'm going to be like I'm quoting that old Futurama episode about the neutral planet. You know where you stand with the devils and the demons and the celestials and all that. A Fey will either just like give you a bunch of stuff because it's bored and it wants to, or it'll kill you because it's not killed someone in a while and it's forgotten what it's like.
Yeah, that's the thing where these things live for millennia, and for you are just a pet to them.
Yeah.
And, it's that sort of almost cruel, childish thing where they're like, I want to brush it backwards with a brush and see what the cat does and all that sort of, again, that sort of selfish cruelty that is unknowable, which is the scariest thing. I completely agree with you in that sense. Whereas, as you were saying, the Fiend, when you make a pact with a Fiend from the lower planes of existence, so
we are nailing the segues.
You are nailing the segues. I have nothing to do with it, but you got like if you're thinking of like doing a pact with like the Demogorgon or Orcus or Baphomet or even archdevils like Asmodeus, Pit Fiends or Yugoloths. We know all about Yugoloths, you and I. So
I'm done with Yugoloths. I am done with them.
So for this, again, looking at the spell list, you've got Burning Hands, of course, and most things about fire, but also like Command, Fireball, Fire Shield, blindness,
fire.
It's a lot of hellfire. Let's be honest. Looking at level 1, you get Dark One's Blessing. So when you reduce a hostile creature to 0 hit points, you gain temporary hit points equal to your charisma modifier and your Warlock spell. So again, that's pretty good. If you're
cool.
Always good to have temporary hit points. And interesting enough, anything to do with fire, I found in D&D, it's always something to do with health. So you get temporary hit points or you regain health in some way if you've got a fire feat. So I thought that was interesting. Dark One's Own Luck. You can call on your patron to alter fate in your favor. When you make an ability check or a saving throw, you can use this feature to add a d10 to your roll. You can do this after seeing the initial roll, but before any of the roll's effects occur. You can use this once after a short or long rest. So it is like bardic inspiration in a way to yourself. And you can get it back on a short rest. And a D10, it doesn't scale at all, but a D10 at level 6 is pretty decent.
I mean, it's going to mean sort of less and less as time goes on, but still, I can't think of a time where in our campaign, we're level, 16 now? You give me a D10 to add to things, I'm happy with that.
Yes, to ability checks and saving throws, but not attack rolls, which obviously bardic inspiration can do. But to a saving throw, always good to have a D10 for sure.
Oh my God, especially if it's something like banishment or petrification. Or oh God.
Level 10, you get Fiendish Resilience. So you choose one damage type when you finish a short or long rest, and you gain resistance to that damage type until you choose a different one. The only sort of stipulation is that damage from magical weapons or silvered weapons ignores this resistance. So obviously,
still, that's great.
You could take resistance to bludgeoning, piercing, whatever damage, but necrotic damage, radiant damage.
Fighting a bunch of vampires. Now I'm resistant to necrotic damage.
Yeah, and again, change it on a short or long rest. Really useful if you're like, oh, we're here now. Give me 10.
Yeah. It is amazing. It's a great feature.
Yeah, I really like that one. And then I think the most famous one I've heard of in terms of sort of features from like patrons, Hurtle Through Hell.
Oh, so God.
When you hit a creature with an attack, you use this feature to instantly transport the target through the lower planes. The creature disappears and hurtles through a nightmare landscape. At the end of your turn, it returns to the space it previously occupied. And if it's not a fiend, it takes 10d10 psychic damage as it reels from its horrific experience.
Just send someone to hell for a little bit. 10d10.
And that's level 14 as well. Oh, it's when you attack a creature. So there's no save against it at all.
Yeah, as long as you've hit, they're going on a trip.
So if you can rush up to the big bad and hit them with something. And because it says with an attack, so it doesn't have to be a melee attack or a ranged, it can be any attack. That's
even
amazing.
better, like you don't even have to risk a roll on it. Magic missile, gone.
Exactly. Oh, really good. let's move on then to the Great Old One. So this is the last one in the handbook.
I don't like Cthulhu.
No, I love this one. It's interesting. So you obviously have like the Archfey, sort of selfish but beautiful sort of thing. You have fiends, which are definitely evil, and then you have the old ones, which are just essentially so big, like they're utterly foreign to the whole fabric of reality. They are unscrutable. It's just incomprehensible. And I just love this idea that, again, the line here is that they might be unaware of your existence or entirely indifferent to you. And I love that as an idea that they just don't know you exist, and you're just siphoning off like a leech your power to them.
Well, that's it. You go from being someone who's made a pact with, Belial or something, to essentially a mosquito.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. Because it's, if you compare just a mortal, let's go back to John Normalman. If you compare him to Cthulhu, it's not even comparable. It's ridiculous. I mean, sure, we can sit here and discuss the various gods and so on, but things like Asmodeus have stat blocks. You can find them, so you can go, my God, they're really strong. Cthulhu doesn't have a stat block. Of course he doesn't. Don't even know if we can call him a he. It's the Great Old One. I think that roleplay-wise would be very difficult to play in terms of how would you even do that? Does Warlock just have really creepy dreams? Are they finding themselves starting to take on more and more features of these old beings? It's weird. Their abilities, big fan. Sorry.
No, I agree. Again, just looking at the spell slots, it's stuff like Dissonant Whispers, Detect Thoughts, Sending Clairvoyance, Everard's Black Tentacles. So you get your tentacles.
Because
of course.
Yeah, of course.
But it's all stuff to do with the mind. And that's, again, as you sort of alluding to, this idea of you're opening yourself up to beyond, but is that a good thing because you lose your humanity? I love that. So level 1, you get Awakened Mind, which gives you the ability to, and I love this, to touch the minds of other creatures. So you can telepathically speak to any creature you see within 30 feet of you, but they can't talk back. As far as I was reading this, it's just you could just tell them stuff.
Oh yeah,
and I just love that they can understand you even if you don't share a common language. But the idea that you give them instructions, so again, very useful. But again, you can only do it to one person at a time, and they can't respond back, and it actually is terrifying as a result. Entropic Ward, so you learn to magically ward yourself against an attack and turn an enemy's failed strike into good luck for the future. So when an attack roll is made against you, you can use your reaction to impose disadvantage on it, which is always good. If the attack misses you, your next attack roll against that creature has advantage. So I love that. Again, if you work that order out in the initiative and you get a low order and they're attacking you, you could easily get back up as well. And I just thought that's a really cool mechanic.
Think about it. Big Bad hits you with a natural 20. You use that. They then miss and you get advantage on your next attack. It's great.
Yeah. And again, that's once per long or short rest. So again, really
short rest.
Short rest, amazing. Yeah, so you should be. It's one of those things where if you know you're going to short rest, use it. Don't piss about waiting to.
That's one thing which I learned with Warlocks. Just you don't have to have the same level of consideration with how often you're going to throw out your spells. You've got less slots, yes, but you are going to get them back quickly.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you just need more of a lie down than most players.
More smoke breaks.
Oh god, yeah. Now in my head, all Warlocks have to have a smoke break. They have to have a fag break. Essentially.
Yeah. I'm now imagining unionized Warlocks.
Now, tell them we want our smoking room back.
It's my Patreon mandated smoke break.
Finally, you've got stuff like Thought Shield. So at level 10, your thoughts can't be read by telepathy or any other means unless you allow it. You also have resistance to psychic damage. And when a creature deals psychic damage to you, the creature takes that same amount of damage that you do. So you halve it, but then they also take that half, essentially, which I think is amazing. And I love it. Again, that idea of somebody reading your thoughts and stuff, we haven't come across that ourselves. But again, it can be very important. If you are the clever one, in quotation marks, of the party, and you're the one giving the instructions, you do become a bit of a target. So it is quite interesting to be like, I shield my mind. I am Professor X of this team.
Oh, you mean Magneto?
Oh, you know what I meant. Yes. Anyway, the final one you get at level 14, which I think is my favorite class feature, is Create Thrall. You gain the ability to infect I love it. Infect a humanoid's mind with the alien magic of your patron.
Alien magic, just those two words.
It's all throughout the great old ones. It is alien magic, and that's what it refers to as. Not super deity or anything like that. It's alien magic. So yeah, you use your action to touch an incapacitated humanoid. That creature is then charmed by you until a remove curse is cast on it. And you can communicate telepathically as long as you're on the same plane. So the fact is that you could knock somebody out and then you just touch them and they are your friend and they can go off and do stuff and it's friendly to you. Yeah. At level 14 is so powerful. It could be the local guard, but it could be somebody a bit higher up if it's the hench person or the not the sub boss, but obviously the big bad evil, but then one of their henchmen servants.
Or if you're doing an evil campaign, town mayor.
Town mayor. Oh yeah.
Knock them out. Do that. Have them healed and pop back up.
Oh, scary.
You now run a town.
Well, let's move on then. So we're going to quickly go to Xanathar's Guide to Everything. So here we have your favorite patron, which I'm going to let you talk all about. So Hexblade. Tell us about Hexblade.
Hexblade. I love Hexblade. Okay, so basically, quick summary of it because I am aware of our time.
Yeah, no worries.
It's basically just instead of Cthulhu, instead of Titania, instead of Asmodeus, you found a sentient weapon, and that is what's giving you your power. There's a bit of a common misconception with this one. So, you can, like in the D&D Beyond, it specifically references the legendary weapon Black Razor. There's a bit of a misconception that being a Hexblade does not automatically give you a great weapon. It can in some cases. That's between you and your DM. Like I know my character got a pretty great weapon at level 4 for having this. But at the same point, it's still your patron. It still has its demands and it still bears a cost. I really like this because especially if you combine it with Pact of the Blade, you've taken your Warlock from being your stereotypical caster to you are in the fray with the fighters, with the barbarians. And your spell list shows that. So instead of something like Fairy Fire, you now get Shield. So if something's going to hit you with a big attack, Shield goes up, you're absolutely fine. Also, you're going to get things like Branding Smite, Elemental Weapon, Staggering Smite, Banishing Smite. I love Banishing Smite. It's like 5d10. If you get it on a crit, then that becomes 10d10. It's great. And it's a brilliant spell. It's a brilliant spell that I will. It's my panic button.
I think all these spells, when you look at them, they're all fighting spells. They're all combat spells. So
it wants you to be in the middle.
It needs you to be up front. Yeah, all the smites essentially. You'll correct me if I'm wrong, but like when you do Radiant Smite and all that stuff, it has to be a melee weapon. So you're up there, you're doing stuff, and all these things they are adding up to you being at the front, fighting the fight. Yeah, essentially.
Then you've got the features. Now, again, this is why I love Hexblade so much and why it makes Warlock so customizable. The first thing you get is the Hexblade's Curse. Now, this is great. This is essentially, it's a first level ability. It's a bonus action. You choose one creature you can see within 30 feet, and for 1 minute, that thing is cursed. The curse only ends early if it dies, if you die, or you're incapacitated. And the entire minute, you get these great bonuses. You get bonus to all your damage rolls to the cursed target that equals your proficiency bonus. In our campaign, our proficiency bonus is +5.
Yes, it will be eventually. Yes, I think so, yeah.
So if you take, like, for instance, you've got an Eldritch Blast with Agonizing Blast on it, and it's also cursed the target. Before you've even rolled, if you're hitting it with like 3-4 blasts, that's straight away 30 to 40 damage before you even touched the dice, which is great.
Amazing.
Any attack roll you make is a critical on a 19 and 20, which we're familiar with from a champion. What makes the champion great? And if the cursed target dies, you regain your hit points. So it's kind of like their soul is leaving them and sealing your wounds.
Just siphoning them a little bit. Yeah,
it's great.
Yeah.
But the thing that makes it a lot different, the thing that makes this different from all of the Warlocks, in my opinion, is the Hex Warrior feature. It sounds pretty basic, but it's so useful, and it's what makes it a really unique class. First level, So you acquire the training necessary to effectively arm yourself for battle. You've got proficiency with medium armor, shields, and martial weapons. And instead of strength or dexterity, your attack stat with weapons is now charisma.
Excellent. Yes.
Great. It's truly, absolutely phenomenal. The only thing is that for that, you have to touch one weapon and really focus and pour your energy into it. As long as you've done that, you can use charisma. So you've got to actually take the time with it. It's not immediate.
No.
And when you're still at that low level, it has to be a one-handed weapon. You can do two-handed weapons later if you've got Pact of the Blade, but straight away, no dice.
You're limited to the one-handed one, which makes sense. Again, you don't want a way to scale it up, I guess. It totally makes sense. Then
it moves on to something, at 6th level, you get a Cursed Spectre. This is one I really like, and I've not had a chance to use it yet in our campaign because it'd be a really dark thing for a paladin to do.
Yes, I'm very aware. When I read this, I was like, I'm sure you can get this now. And I'm like, I don't want you to use it.
Yeah, they would be very, very dark, especially for a lawful good paladin. But when you kill a humanoid, you can cause its spirit to rise from its corpse as a spectre. Spectres creep me out, man. They're not great. Like, 22 hit points.
Life drain they have as well.
Yeah, though there's a lot of good stuff with them. And it's getting a bonus to their attacks equal to your charisma as well. So again, it's all about charisma just as much. So instead of healing with someone's soul, you essentially bend it into your service. That's a bit messed up. And then of course we go on to Armor of Hexes. This is a great one to really, really irritate your DM with. At 10th level, your Hex Score is more powerful. So if you've cursed someone with Hexblade's Curse and they hit you with an attack roll, you roll a d6. 4 or higher, the attack misses you regardless of its roll. If your DM natural 20s you roll a 4 on the dice, that's it. That's not happening.
The fact it's a reaction and it's not per proficiency or you get it back on the lowest. You could do that every single time. And as at level 10 as well. That is, I feel like that's so early on. And it's a cool feature, absolutely. But again, I think the only thing I'd have the stipulation for that, it would be like, you need to remember that because that's all. It's a very useful thing. But you have to be like, let me just. No, you don't. Like constantly after every single. Once per turn of combat. But really interesting Armor of Hexes.
That's it as well. And, if you're fighting something with multiple attacks as well, it's not, it's your reaction, isn't it? So you've got to use it well. It's got to be like, do I want to let that one slide? Do I not? Which can be a bit of a risk. But hey, it's when you combine something with shield, if you think about it, your Hexblade is holding the line. Got the shield out, they've got the medium arm, they've got the half plate probably because, obviously if you use medium arm, you're going to use half plate. And they've used the spell shield. So if an attack does get through, then it has to go through its whole other thing to still hit you. Suddenly your D8 hit die character has now become tanky. It's great.
It is great. I love it.
And finally, we've got Master of Hexes. So 14th level, you can spread your Hexblade's Curse from a slain creature to another creature. So instead of getting the health or taking its soul, you can just move it on to the next thing. Just one by one, getting everything taken down, which instead of, because up until this time, let's be honest, you're using Hexblade's Curse on the big things.
Yeah.
Whereas, if you're fighting 6 or 7 small things, you can just be like, okay, now you, as you're just knocking them down one by one.
Yeah, over and over again.
All the things before going for the big thing.
And that doesn't require, for example, with Hunter's Mark, doesn't require a bonus action to switch it after the creature's gone down. It just happens.
Yeah, as long as you're alive.
As long as you're alive, so you just need to remember doing it. That's the only thing I'd say. But amazing thing. I'm going to quickly go through the Celestial, which is the other one in Xanathar's. So this one, again, we've talked so far about unknowable entities which have a shady past. Celestial is good. It is a being of the upper plane, so it can be anything from solar. It could be, again, it feels very paladin in the way it is. I love this line, though. Your pact with that being allows you to experience the barest touch of holy light that illuminates the multiverse. It's good. but not too good. Like, take that back.
This, which is really good, and how you've kind of picked up on the writing there, because the next paragraph immediately begins with being connected to such a power, which, again, the barest touch can cause changes in your behavior. You'll find yourself driven to annihilate the undead, defeat fiends, protect the innocent. Mm-hmm. And you long to be in that celestial realm, which is not good. We just traveled through the celestial realm, and by the end, your character did not want to leave.
No, I was very happy where
yeah, which is great. A barbarian being super happy in a lawful good realm.
This is all right. Looking at the spell slot again, a lot of this is like cure wounds, revivify, that's a guardian of faith, but also a little bit of fire. Flaming sphere, wall of fire, flame strike, that sort of thing. So it's almost like holy fire. At level 1, you get healing light. So the ability, so this is interesting, to channel celestial energy to heal wounds. You have a pool of D6s to spend on fueling this healing. And a bit like, in my head, it's a bit like lay on hands, but not. So essentially, you, as a bonus action, you can heal one creature within 60 feet of you, spending dice from the pool. And you have a number of dice equal to 1 plus your warlock level. So at level 1, obviously you get 2d6, but all the way up to level 20, you get 21 d6s. If you're going straight all the way to top. So you could just spend as much as you want. Also, the maximum you spend at once is your charisma modifier. Yeah, so equal to your charisma modifier. So if you've got a really big charisma modifier, so like a +8 or something like that, that's 8d6 you can spend at one time as a bonus action to heal someone that you can see within 60 feet. Amazing. You can only get that on a long rest though. So I think they're very aware that, this could be broken on a short rest, where you could just be like, spend all the magic and then come back, especially when that's at level 1 as well.
But that being said, if you've got all of them, to get that much back on a long rest is amazing, because it's not like hit die where half of them come back, or like certain charges on weapons where, say, only a few come back. It's all of them. So great, and now you can heal everything again.
Everything, yeah, it's amazing. You get Radiant Soul at level 6. You have resistance to radiant damage, and when you cast a spell that is either radiant or fire damage, you add your charisma modifier to it, which again, really, really useful, really good to have. Yeah, again, that whole idea that the damage modifier is the charisma, which again, if you've put that as your quick build thing, it's the reason why it's there. But again, as we all know, Tasha just changes everything, so you can be something else. Celestial resistance. You gain temporary hit points when you finish a short or long rest, and they're equal to your warlock level plus your charisma modifier. Equally, though, you can choose up to 5 creatures you see at the end of the rest, and they gain temporary hit points that's equal to half your warlock level, so you get half of it essentially. Which again, very useful to have again on a short on long rest. That's always useful to have if you're again doing battle after battle. Is that take a quick rest, regain spell slots, but also a little bit of temporary hit points for everyone. And then finally, Searing Vengeance. When you have to make a death saving throw at the start of your turn, you can instead spring back to your feet with a burst of radiant energy, because you're like, ha-ha!
Yeah, just ridiculous.
Yeah,
it's brilliant.
I definitely saw, again, in joke between me and David, I definitely saw John Hawthorne doing this sort of magic if he was a warlock. Don't worry, he's not a warlock, so he's definitely not doing this.
He's also not alive, thank God.
Not alive, yeah. Well, not anymore. That's a small in joke that no one will get, but never mind. You regain hit points that is equal to half your hit point maximum, and then you stand up if you choose to. Every creature of your choice within 30 feet of you takes radiant damage equal to 2d8 plus your charisma modifier and is blinded to the end of your current turn. Again, only on a long rest, but again, half your hit point maximum, and then you can like, I can get up, and then other people take damage and blinded. Pretty powerful. Really, really like it.
It's the ultimate second coming.
We'll briefly go through the last couple, because again, we have run out of time, unfortunately, because we were too busy chatting about how
we do this.
We do this all the time. But the final ones we're going to sort of talk about, and interestingly enough, I think we've talked about them almost in comparison. So there's one called the Fathomless. I do see this as a great old one, but underwater. So this is definitely a more of a Cthulhu type thing. There's a lot of tentacles in this one. So that you can, like, for example, Tentacles of the Deep, where you summon spectral tentacles to attack your foes. You have the Gift of the Sea, which means you can swim and breathe underwater. It's always good to breathe underwater. Certainly at level 1, that's pretty damn handy. Oceanic Soul, you gain resistance to cold damage. When you're fully submerged, any other creature that's fully submerged can understand your speech. So you can go be Aquaman in the water.
Oh my God.
Grasping Tentacles, so you learn Everard's Black Tentacles, which is always useful, and you gain some temporary hit points for that as well. And then finally, Fathomless Plunge, you magically open temporary conduits to watery destinations. I do quite like this one. So again, it's level 14. You can teleport yourself and up to 5 other willing creatures you can see within 30 feet of you. Amidst a world of tentacles, you all vanish and reappear up to 1 mile away in a body of water that you have seen. So again, a bit like Tree Strike, where you move from tree to tree. This time it is water. So I like the idea that you're trying to get out of somewhere and you're like, there's a small fishing port that you've just sailed out from. Oof, you're there. It's a bit of a Hail Mary, I think, but I do quite like that.
Even better. Tiny pond and there's 8 of you.
Yeah, just like,
everyone just like really scrunched up.
Wet. There's other 2 which I do think is quite similar, but they are different. There is the Undead and the Undying. You have the Undying is the new one from Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft, and the Undead, I believe, is from the Sword Coast. So the Undead, for example, is a deathless being that defines the cycle of life and death. Whilst the Undying, death has no sway over your patron, who has unlocked the secrets to everlasting life. Although such things have come across, they do sound very similar, that they are slightly different in that respect. But the one we've not got a chance to really, really go through, and I'm aghast that we're not, but I'm sure we will go through it at some point, is the Genie. A lot of variation. There's so many ones in here. So they're sort of described as sort of noble genies. They are mostly sort of elemental in some ways. And interesting enough, I don't know, I can't describe it. So you get 4 types essentially. So you can roll on the table, choose ones. This is where I'm going to get these names wrong now, but you can go for a Dao, a Jinn, an Ifrit, and a Marid. And each of them are assigned with an element. So you've got earth, air, fire, and water. Again, having that sort of elemental flavor to your Warlock stuff as well. And you get certain spells based on that. Quite like this, a Genie's Vessel. I don't know if you read this, David. You have a tiny object which you use as tiny object that you use as a spellcasting focus, and you can decide what it is. It could be an oil lamp, it could be a ring with a compartment, which I quite liked as a little.
Just going to open my ring.
A hollow statuette or ornate lantern. And you can do 2 things. You can bottle respite. As an action, you can magically disappear and enter your vessel. And later on, you can get the other people into it. And you can take it's essentially a bit like Leomund's tiny hut, essentially. Yeah. You can have a rest in there and gain stuff back. And you can invite other people in as well. And also use it as something to store things in. So it's a bit like a bag of holding plus this spell. And I love it because it talks about it if you... it looks exactly like the area that you would expect to be inside it. So if it's a ring with a compartment with, like, say, a big gem, it will look like you're inside the crystal maze. I love the idea of the hollow statuette. It is like a woman with like a basket on her head, and you can see out of it, and it's just a very oddly shaped.
Oh God, I'd be having Wicker Man like horror dreams in that.
Like an ornate lantern as well would be absolutely beautiful, like almost papery walls and stuff would be very cool. I like that. And then the other thing you get from that is that once during each of your turns, you can deal extra damage to your target equal to your proficiency bonus. And this damage is determined by your patron, which, so again, the bludgeoning comes from the Dao. So again, that earth sort of elemental. So anything with the Dao, words.
I don't know.
Any earth elementals, I think, it's always going to be bludgeoning and sort of not normal damage in quotation marks, but that sort of thing. It is more common, I guess, compared to, say, thunder, which is Jinn, fire, which is Ifrit, and coal, which is Marid. So again, it's just to make sure if you were like wanted a particular type of Warlock with that flavor of damage type, that's where you need to just double check who your patron is from that. Final one on the Genie, so I think this is important. So right at the end, you have limited wish. You entreat your patron to grant a small wish for you. As an action, you speak your desire to the Genie's vessel, an effect of one spell that is 6th level or lower and has a casting time of 1 action. So that could be pretty good. And it says you can only use this feature. Once you use this feature, you can't use it again for 1d4 long rests. That is the first time I've ever seen something that has number of rests for it, long rests. It's not just one. So there's so many level 6 spells, probably teleportation, all that sort of thing. Not compared to that 9th level spells we were talking about, but enough to create stuff. So the idea that it has to be limited to 1d4 long rests I just think that's such a great thing. So yeah, I would highly recommend. Obviously, we were too busy talking about Warlocks that we didn't go through all the Warlocks, but I think the Genie is a really interesting one from Tasha's. I think more people haven't noticed it yet, so I don't know if they're going to take it up on it yet.
Like I say, it is a great class. It's a highly customizable class. You can find, you have 2 warriors together, and despite their subclasses, they're going to be pretty similar. Mm-hmm. You can have 2 warlocks together, and you would not know them to be the same class. No. Like it's great, and I will forever extol its many virtues.
David, David, thank you so much for this whistle-stop tour talking about all things Warlock. Excuse me.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
David, do you have something to plug that you might want to talk about?
I do, actually, because I never plug anything aside from your stuff.
Oh, well, why don't you? Well, you could also plug my stuff, but I think it's more important you plug your stuff as we come to the end of the episode.
Okay, so the one thing which I want to mention is the D&D show created by a very talented man called Matt Bateman, a good friend of ours. He has been working for a very long time creating this show, Who Lives, Who Dice. It's just on Twitter as Who Lives, Who Dice. And we've started all the filming and stuff, the kind of anticipatory preparation, social media postings have begun. It's been so much fun. I've gone from playing a paladin with like 24 charisma to someone with 6 charisma. So I've got like whatever roleplay whiplash is, and it's been so much fun. There's loads of great art that already exists for all the characters. There's some great settings, some great scenery, and some truly really talented players and role players. It's going to be great, and I'm so looking forward to seeing it released. So yeah, if you're looking for a D&D thing, check that out.
Brilliant. Well, yes, again, currently no, it's TBC currently, but I'm looking forward to when it finally comes out, and knowing you, I'm going to be listening on the podcast version if that ever happens. But yes, no, congratulations, David. It sounds like an amazing thing. And yes, Matt,
thank you.
We've known through other projects, and it will be, I can only imagine how cool that is to be in that. So
it's great. Yeah.
And just to finish off, my name is Fiona, and I run the What Am I Rolling podcast, which is a twice monthly RPG one-shot podcast. As always, it's going very, very well. David knows this briefly, but I am now writing on and off a little bit for Dragon Plus magazine. Which is very exciting. I've got a couple of pieces coming out, which is also terrifying because people are actually going to read them. But hey, that's all good. We also have an offer code for this podcast. It's basically if you go to Third Space Gaming, which is your friendly local game store in Burnley, and type in the offer code DMBC. I had to do the action then, to remember what it was. DMBC. Typing, and no one else can see that except David, who laughed. So thank you for that. You get 10% off your first purchase on their website, and it could be on anything. It could be on RPG books, it could be on terrain, it could be on board games. It's whatever you want. DMBC. I'll do the action. DMBC for 10% off. David, thank you so much. I appreciate this so much, and best of luck with the show. I can't wait to tune in. And for those people who are listening, thank you so much. And I think there might be another episode next on the list. So go listen to that when that's out. Cool. Okay.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye-bye.